Severance Season 1 made everyone take Apple TV seriously. Sure, Ted Lasso may have been the first bona fide hit that the streaming service had, but it was Severance that made everyone realize Apple could compete with the likes of HBO, FX when it came to delivering high quality, capital P prestige TV dramas. With that being said, its extended hiatus did serve to stir up some anxiety in fans. Many wondered if the show would lose its touch, if the time spent away from these characters and the multifaceted plot of the show would erode some of the interest that many of us had in Apple TV's Golden Child. But when January of this year came around, when the teaser started dropping, when they had that exhibit in New York, there was almost a swagger in Apple's marketing. Like they just had this unabashed confidence that season 2 would hit all the notes people wanted it to. Was that confidence justified? I think in many respects, yes, it was. Severance Season 2 is an unorthodox and frequently riveting contribution to pop culture that I think rewards both the more casual viewers of the show and also the ones that hop on Reddit as soon as an episode concludes. It is also boring. Its moment to moment dialogue can leave a lot to be desired at times, and the logical gaps are so massive at points, it could make you want to throw your Lumen coffee cup at the goddamn screen. It is a noticeably flawed product, but when it's clicking, when it is clicking, it is the definition of must watch television. So, with full spoilers ahead, let's unpack the great, let's unpack the not so great about Severance Season 2. What is Season 2 of Severance about? Well, it's a near 10-hour exploration of the question, what is Lumen? I was tempted to say it really was a season about Mark's search for Gemma, but I don't really think that's true. Between the disinterest that Irv and Dylan had in this objective and the multiple episode-long excursions we take that are completely disinterested in that goal, it really doesn't feel proper to say that Severance Season 2 was in fact the quest for Gemma. Rescuing Gemma may be a fuzzy North Star for Mark, but it feels like the season as a whole really just wanted to dive deeper into Lumen itself, to ask questions about the company. What is the company's true purpose? Who are the minds responsible for their technology? Are they making clones? Where does that one elevator go to? To me, it is rather important to acknowledge that Severance is making a choice. It is making a deliberate choice to sometimes de-emphasize the journey of these characters and their personal struggle with Severance technology, to occasionally forego developing who these people are in order to build an elaborate web of mysteries and to curate a distinct vibe for Lumen overall. And it's a choice that really doesn't bite the show in the ass as much as you think it would. The mysteries of the show are captivating, and the characters as a whole remain easy to invest in. However, I would be lying if I said the show's goal of finely tuning the mood that Lumen and its employees are supposed to evoke, and the lack of attention to some of the key players, don't account for some of Season 2's biggest issues. The person unaffected by all of this is Mark, because he's the lead and gets plenty of screen time and the utmost thought put into him. Mark is great this season, and what I love about Mark is that he is a hero, not another anti-hero. He is someone who I can unapologetically root for, flawed though he may be. I'm all in with Mark. I attempt to enjoy his Audi and Annie equally, even after episode 10, and I think that Adam Scott is simply the man this season. What I love about his performance is that he makes energy the key differentiator between his innie and outie. I don't think it's a mistake at all that the first scene that features any Mark, he is in a mad dash to find Miss Casey, and the first scene that we get of his outie, he is simply exhausted by Rickon and Devin interrogating him about his innie self coming to life at their house. I think it's such an interesting choice to make fatigue the separator between these two selves. Any Mark is almost eager to search for Miss Casey, to explore every nook and cranny of the severed floor. He has an optimism to him, while Audi Mark seems constantly exhausted. None of that optimism is left. He is really only pushing forward out of this sense of duty to his wife, and even then, every inch of progress that he makes feels like a battle. These two versions of Mark are not so jarringly different. They're just different enough to feel like there really is a flip that switches in Mark's brain every time he goes through the elevator. Next, I want to talk about Dylan. Audi Dylan we don't get too much of, and I don't think that's a problem. Innie Dylan is the only character whose personality I do not like. I think he is a poor excuse for comic relief. I think he's quite similar to Fack in Season 3 of The Bear, where so many moments are carved out specifically for this character, for Zach Cherry to do their thing. And I don't think Cherry nor the writers really rise to meet the occasion to actually make those moments truly funny. But Dylan as a dramatic character absolutely works. Maybe the subplot with his wife doesn't seriously elevate the whole season, But Dylan is a hell of a lot more interesting in scenes where he's not just saying curse words and then dipping. When he has some skin in the game, this character grabs your attention, and both Cherry and the writers more than meet the moment when it comes to Innie Dylan's plea in episode 9 and his voiceover in episode 10. They are moving and memorable sequences that stand out in episodes filled with greatness. Dylan is emblematic of a larger, albeit not critical, problem in the show for me. Severance partially became notable for its refusal to be a self-serious sci-fi show in season 1. I mean, people remember and cherish the UUR, the music dance experience. They love the comedic flourishes of the show. But the show is mainly, not always, but mainly at its best when it takes itself fully seriously and strips itself of those flourishes. As you will see throughout this video, the drama of the show almost always works for me. The comedy of the show, naturally harder to pull off, doesn't. And Dylan's shortcomings are part of Severance's bigger problem of attempting to keep itself a pseudo-comedy and falling short just a bit too often. Ironically, the beginning of Dylan's subplot with his wife is also emblematic of another problem in Severance this year. Dylan becomes entranced by this opportunity. It doesn't slowly consume him, it immediately makes him disregard not just Mark's search for Miss Casey, but also the group's larger goal of investigating Lumen. And it is borderline maddening to see someone who is committed enough to the group's ideals that he physically battled for the entirety of the overtime contingency, seemingly discard any care he had for the group's mission. And it's not the only moment that leaves you scratching your head in bewilderment. Irv deducing that Helly is not just a mole, but in fact an Egan. Devin calling up Cobell of all people to help Mark. Dylan scolding Mark for being a jerk to Helly when not one episode before she duped the whole group and is actually the heir apparent to the family the Core 4 loathe and want to stop above all else. On the one hand, it almost feels inevitable that a show as twisty as this has logical inconsistencies, but the ones I mentioned are so stark, so half-heartedly justified by the show that they absolutely lessen my enjoyment of season 2. When it comes to the remaining members of the group, if you just looked at their screen time on a piece of paper, the amount that Irv and Helly got this year, it would be alarming, certainly cause for concern. But what's interesting is that in Irv's case, I don't think it really affects my enjoyment of his character overall, but in Helly's case, it absolutely does. Now, if you asked me in 2022, do I think Irv deserves more screen time, I would have said absolutely. But what I did not realize is that the show says enough about Irv in season 1. He is, after all, the more fiery, revolutionary side to Irving, and so for him to go out dying for the sake of the cause in episode 4, I think makes sense, and I don't think we really missed anything by not having him in those later episodes of this season. And what we get with the Audi with Irving is not just an acceptable substitute to the content we get with Irv in season 1, it's probably better than that content. Turturro and Walken have danced around each other for 2 seasons now, but in season 1 it was a rather corny will they won't they, one old guy cautiously flirting with the other. I didn't really feel the chemistry that you would want between two characters who supposedly like each other. In season 2, the chemistry is there. Turturro and Walken really manifest it, and even at the dinner table with Bert's husband there, you can sense the primal romantic intrigue these characters have in each other, and to me, it really catapults their love story to the least interesting the show had to the most interesting, and that's not even mentioning the added intrigue of Bert being associated with Lumen and potentially sabotaging, killing Irving. It just is such a good evolution of the story that we had in season 1, and I think more than gets the job done for Irv and Irving overall. Then we get to Helly/Helena. Now, Helena is a slam dunk, and Britt Lauer as Helena could not be better, and I can't do her performance justice in just this video, but high level, I really enjoy that at times, Helena seems exactly like the other Lumen goons, like Drummond, like Cobell, stone-faced, mechanical, cold-blooded, willing to do whatever it takes, and then at other times, she really is like a more reserved Helly, someone that is very much resentful of the situation they are in, resentful of being a cog in the machine. But as much as Helena is a success, I think Helly is almost equal parts a failure. Irv's absence later on in the season doesn't hurt because we have Irving, and the Irving stuff is great, so there's no need to complain about the absence of Irv. Helly's absence early on in the season absolutely does matter because it affects how she behaves later on, because Helena, disguising herself as Helly, seduces Mark. Well, then Helly becomes rather preoccupied with that, and that kind of becomes her for a season of TV. Helly is the first character we meet in all of Severance. She, from the get-go, was never meant to just be Mark's love interest, and yet she kind of becomes that in season 2. First 4 episodes she's out of commission, and then everything she does, says in episodes 5 and 6 kind of go back to Mark. She feels violated that Helena did this act with Mark. She feels betrayed by Mark that he couldn't recognize it wasn't Helly doing the act. She feels angry that this special moment between them is forever ruined. And then when they have sex, everything kind of neatly resolves itself. And then we have 2 episodes that don't feature the core four at all. And that's 80% of the season. And what do we get from Helly besides that she wanted to have sex with Mark and did? I do think there is much more positive than negative to say about the core four, but there was a healthy mix of strengths and weaknesses that they brought to the table in this season. What I will say is that it is a feat the show is able to make them as compelling as they are, considering that the severance that we knew between these 4 characters in season 1 is dead and likely never coming back. It felt like Severance was more concerned with the outie world than the innie one this time around, which is the complete inverse of season 1. The outie world was the least interesting part of that season. I wanted to be inside Lumen all the time, and now it's the opposite. The time spent outside of the severed floor is so good, and every time we return there or have, basically an innie-centric episode like episode 4, I feel my interest waning a bit, which is the result of a couple of things. I think when it comes to the innies, the show can be rather formulaic and monotonous. Like what happens a lot of the time when the innies are on screen is this. They decide they want to explore an area. The show patiently observes them walking through said area. Like on the severed floor, we can see them go through an entire hallway, seeing the pathing lights slowly turn on and off as they progress. They come across a bizarre location or object. They quizzically look at said object or location. They either ruminate with each other and fail to come to a conclusion as to what the hell is going on, or even worse, they encounter someone from Lumen. They ask questions to the Lumen employee, sort of make some progress, get weirded out or intimidated, and then the scene ends and we have no new information to truly chew on. I don't think this problem runs throughout the entire season, but the overflow of achingly slow-paced direction and cryptic Lumen exchanges in episodes 3 through 5 just killed them for me. I don't think Severance is bad at doing a slow burn. I really enjoyed episode 8, which I think is similarly methodical in its pacing, but the promise of exploring more of Cobell's backstory is so much more intriguing than seeing another funky room on the severed floor, or learning more about Kier's mythical childhood. I think the show has smartly become more interested in the true history of Lumen and has spent less time dealing with Kier Egan folklore, but every time those folklore elements rear their head, I lose so much interest, like sending Mark and Helly on what feels like an odyssey to find Gwendolyn Christie in a weird goat room to find out Miss Casey is alive, which we already knew, just feels like a total waste of an episode. Now, what I think could have made a difference in these episodes is the fear factor of the Lumen employees. Mark, Helly, Milchek himself leave a lot of their conversations unsettled by a Lumen employee or exec. They feel threatened, feel troubled after the exchanges they have, but I am not. I am not unsettled by Drummond, Christie's character, or Milchek when he's supposed to be intimidating, and this creates a real disconnect. Both myself and the characters endure many scenes where we don't get valuable information from Lumen employees, but they go through the experience of being scared. I do not, and subsequently get no information that advances the plot, and get no emotional reaction out of it either. I get meaningless word salad, and Miss Wong in episode 1 was really the closest I got to being really made uncomfortable by a Lumen employee, really being in the character's shoes. This is in part a negative byproduct of the show trying to remain funny. Severance wants to have the proverbial cake and eat it too. Characters are supposed to be intimidating and hysterical all at the same time in a given scene, and it's a balancing act I don't really think the show pulls off. The end result is a healthy amount of dialogue exchanges that are awkward, that stall narrative momentum, and that aren't particularly impressive from an acting standpoint either. The outie world, in contrast, is largely unburdened by the types of stylized but vapid exchanges that happen all too frequently inside the halls of Lumen HQ. With the actors acting more naturalistic in the outie world, with the characters acting more like normal human beings, it doesn't make sense for characters to essentially filibuster an entire conversation by acting weird. These exchanges are regularly purposeful, but more than that, they're stunning from an acting perspective. Whether it be Helena and Mark's scene at the restaurant, Bert and Irving's goodbye at the train station, Cobell's confrontations with Sissy, these back and forths maybe don't have a signature line that comes to mind every time you think of the scene, but they are rewatchable. There are plenty of tiny things to admire about the performances. There's something classic and simple about these scenes. They would work and be gripping in a show where Severance technology doesn't exist. It's further evidence to me that the show thrives when it's not trying to be cute, and that future seasons can absolutely work even if there is less time spent with the innies. It's natural to dissect the show by breaking it down into innie versus outie, but that would leave at least one major blind spot, that being episode 7, Chikai Bardo, which just throws all the rules of the show out of the window. It's rather hard to extrapolate commentary on Chikai Bardo to the rest of the season because it is its own beast, and sure, maybe the story itself of a woman having a miscarriage, blaming it all on herself, and then fractures forming in a marriage is not the most original story in the whole world, but the episode as a whole is so dizzying, it's so formally unconventional, that it's hard not to be in awe of it. I guess what you can extrapolate is the top notch direction that shines most in this episode, but runs throughout the entire season. There are bits of direction here that are nothing short of gobsmacking. I have never witnessed a scene directed quite like Mark's episode 1 Dash. Severance is fearless with its camera. It does things that other shows would run away from in fear. There are things to admire about the restraint and placement of static shots we get, and the flashiness of crash zooms we get as well. The thought put into some of these frames is mind-blowing, and it extends beyond direction. It goes into areas such as set design, cinematography. I mean, the whole world of Severance is cloaked in snow. When Gemma appears in episode 7, it's spring. That's a brilliant choice. Someone in the not-so-distant future is going to write a 40-page college paper about how red and blue are used in this show, and maybe you're not getting value out of it in real time as you're watching the episode. Maybe you're not always paying attention to it, but man, when I saw Mark's outie face ensconced in innie blue and Mark's innie face ensconced in outie red in that final episode as they're talking to each other, my jaw nearly hit the floor. I was giddy with excitement. Their commitment to playing off a color scheme is nothing short of extraordinary. And I will be the first one to admit that Severance is at times style over substance. It sometimes chooses the showy option instead of the correct one. Hell, in episode 7, that being the first true introduction to Gemma certainly adds to the wow factor of it, but it also lessens the impact of some of its pivotal moments, like her calling out to Mark at the end. Yes, introducing her earlier would have reduced the shock value of that episode, but it also would have helped our attachment to that character and would have made the drama a lot more stirring. But when it excels at both style and substance, when it merges those two elements together like it does in episodes 1 and 10, it is untouchable. It feels like a once-in-a-lifetime event and one of the most original shows of this generation. With all of that out of the way, with all the good and bad being said, I want to give my final score range of Severance Season 2 as between 8.6 to 8.7 out of 10. It is great. It is must-watch. But it is also clearly imperfect. I want to specifically thank Jesse and JG for their Lightspeed Brothers support. I want to thank everyone for watching, and I will see you all next time.